Well, that's a matter the Dáil will have to consider. I have to say I was disappointed in the manner in which these were released, literally on the day of the campaign. I don't know who was organising the press or the arrangements in Leinster House. I don't think that they did any favours to themselves or to John O'Donoghue. I'm not sure how the details and how the protocols, for example, you mentioned Mrs O'Donoghue travelling. I'm not sure how that compares with the arrangements that have applied for previous Ceann Comhairle.
Well, I've had plenty of. Well, no,
yeah.
what we are told is that while it might be acceptable for the state, well, it would be on official visits, the state would cough up for the travel expenses of a minister or Ceann Comhairle, but a modest travel expenses, not it seems like the likes of O'Donoghue was spending on, but certainly not his wife. I mean, she has to pay for herself. She should have paid for herself. If a spouse, if the particular travel arrangements are, and I don't want to upset Ken in Dublin, who always gets upset when I'm on this particular programme and sends in some vitriolic things. If the appropriate protocol is that the spouse should attend or should travel with the person on that particular occasion, then I think it's appropriate that expense be yes,
dealt
but
with.
on how many occasions can you possibly say that it is justified for the wife to go? Is he that insecure that he can't attend a dinner without having his missus on his arm?
Well, I won't go into that. I won't go into that. I'm just simply saying, if there are trips, for example, for the Speaker of one Parliament to the Speaker of the other Parliament, if the protocol demands that the spouse goes, the spouse goes. I don't know what the detail is or how you compare that to previous.
Come on, now we have seen over the last few weeks. You can't possibly justify that, Dick Roach.
Well,
we've seen numerous occasions when it's come out through the FOI information that the Sunday Tribune have been exposing. His wife went on numerous trips with him. They stayed at one stage in where was it, in the south of France or something like that, €900 a night in these hotels.
I'm simply making the point. I don't know how the details of these trips compare with the details of other trips or what the arrangements are at Ceann Comhairle level. I really don't, and I'm not going to get involved.
Well, let's assume that it is incorrect, that it was not right for the Ceann Comhairle to actually bring his wife on these trips. Let's just make that assumption, because I'm sure it's the right assumption. Maybe it was worth his while taking her on a couple of them, and you could justify that, but not. Listen to this now, right? On the one 3-day trip to Paris to address the Parliament there, the couple spent 2 of the days at Longchamp races with a chauffeur-driven car waiting outside for them at a cost of more than €800.
I can see, as Michael has said, the devil is in the detail, and
there's the detail.
That has to be explained. But you make the point that you assume that it's wrong that the spouse should accompany the Ceann Comhairle on trips. I'm not sure that assumption is right.
But do you think that we're a nation of idiots, Dick Roach? Do you absolutely think that Irish people, they have just passed this treaty, and many of them passed it in anger because they believe that the government is doing a really bad job in running this country?
I don't think that we're a nation of idiots. And as Michael has said, the devil is in the detail in this particular issue. But I equally don't think that the assumption that you made is a correct assumption. Now, I believe that this is very difficult territory for John O'Donoghue, and the Dáil itself will have to give consideration to this. There is no doubt about that. And I am personally, I was happened to be very annoyed at the manner in which this particular issue was put into the Dáil library on the day of the referendum. I had all sorts of issues with that. But you ask me in most emotive terms, I think the Irish people are a nation of idiots. No, they're not.
But that's exactly how people are going to view your response this morning, because we've heard these justifications now for John O'Donoghue over the last number of weeks, trying to say, well, maybe some of these expenses were justified, and of course he himself has said, well, he didn't really realise that he was incurring such high expenses because the Department of Finance set down the rules. Generally, the general public, Dick Roach, haven't accepted those responses.
If you're asking me, would I be involved in this type of expenditure, or would my wife be involved in this type of expenditure, the answer is an emphatic no. because I take, as most people know, a very austere view towards expenses. It's very easy to be judgmental of somebody else. I happen to take a particular view. My wife takes a very particular view. She tends not to travel with me because there are very few occasions where we have done that.
Well, you would have been Minister for European. You've been here again, so you would be justified in travelling. So you would.
I would. Yes, I would. That's true. I would. And in fact, there are many occasions when the invitations would have extended to my wife, and she would not have accompanied me. I actually believe that we need to have a very root and branch look at this whole issue. Just there were issues that were mentioned last time, and you asked me a question about the chauffeur, for example, driven in London Airport. That is a very bad practice, and it should just be stopped. It's very simple, and I think that the Minister for Finance has made it clear that he certainly doesn't want that type of expenditure. That was something that was happening, and I don't think, to be fair to ministers from all political hues, that they would have been aware that that particular issue was clocking up money. And Michael made the point that the devil is in the detail here, and the devil is in the detail. I don't know about individual trips. I don't know about what the invitations were for.
Well, I'll give you another detail anyway. We can bring in the devil in this as well. In March, O'Donoghue was not for once, this is according to the Sunday Tribune, heading off to Cheltenham, and instead had to make do with Houston, New Orleans and Washington for the St. Patrick's Day festivities. Flights on this trip cost €12,404 between himself and Kate Ann, with transport costs on the trip coming in at €4,956. That's a disgrace, Dick Roach.
Well, it's a very, very high set of figures.
So why aren't you and your colleagues now in Cabinet turning around and going, listen, this is a total embarrassment here. We have to get rid of this guy and let's put somebody else in, and let's start creating a culture of transparency and accountability in this country?
Well,
that's what people want now.
Well, I agree with the culture of transparency and accountability.
We don't have a culture of transparency and accountability.
Well, I disagree with you on that. We actually have a very good FOI system in this country.
which journalists now have to pay. I mean, as the Sunday Tribune said, they had to pay €600 for this latest piece of information.
On the payment issue, I defend that, because I don't believe that the taxpayers should actually pick up the bill for journalistic costs. As you well know,
the introduction of the Freedom of Information Act has made it much more difficult for journalists to get pieces of information, and generally for people. It takes a lot more effort now to get that.
Hold on. I disagree with you on that. In fact, I was the first person to move the Freedom of Information Act. We actually had a private member's Freedom of Information Act in my name in the Shannon a number of years ago, and Ethna Fitzgerald then picked it up because they agreed that she was Minister.
Okay.
And we have an FOI.
Why do all journalists disagree with you? Gráinne Gilmore, what do you think about this whole story?
Sorry, before you cut me off, if you could compare our FOI Act to other FOI Acts, it is a very good FOI Act.
Well, if that's the case, why do so many journalists why are so many journalists angry now at the fact that it is so hard and difficult to get actually proper information? You have to be very clear about what you need. Gráinne Gilmore, what are your own views on this story?
Well, one of the things, as you were talking about the spouse there, and whether the spouse should be able to travel with the minister or the Ceann Comhairle as it is, what this reminded me of was just the difference of reaction in Italy when similar stories came up. Well, not similar stories, actually, they were nothing like it. When this is the problem, when a number of Italian parliamentarians were having affairs, and those who were not based in Rome claimed and got actually a lot of response for this. They claimed that they should be given an extra don't cheat allowance in order to because they didn't have spouses in Rome with them.
Okay, but you could make a more fair comparison with Britain and what has happened there.
Absolutely.
When their expenses
and this
have
is
been
the question,
exposed.
and I think there is a really important question of political accountability and the lack of political accountability in
you
the
don't
Irish,
agree with what Dick Roach is saying,
I don't
that we have
agree
a
with
transparent
him.
society.
I think on the issue of John O'Donoghue, I think his position is absolutely untenable at this stage. I think that this story, particularly in terms of the spending, this is a different story to what we had before in terms of when he was Minister for Arts and Tourism, because this is a story about his spending as Ceann Comhairle, and given the controversy surrounding it, I think his position is untenable because of the integrity of the office of Ceann Comhairle itself. It is by its nature not politically accountable because he doesn't have to run in the next election, and he's supposed to be essentially above politics. So I think there's a question of integrity of the houses of the Oireachtas if he stays in this position. But there's a broader question, I think, of political lack of accountability in this country, which I think you've touched upon when we compare it to, for instance, the United Kingdom. And the John O'Donoghue story, like the Foss story, is a story of ministers and members of the government distancing themselves from decisions which are made. You look across the water to the UK, there's a problem with the marking of A-level results. The Education Secretary has to resign. There's a problem in the prisons. The Home Secretary resigns. That doesn't happen here.